Umoya Ulight, Umoya Bright. Welcome to another Moya live stream. Thank you to everybody supporting the channel. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Remember, we rely on you to keep the lights on. Thank you, especially to our members on the Moya channel on YouTube. Who pay every month to help us keep the lights on. As you know, this is the home of African education. We make sure that we give you the schooling that you didn't get at the Mlumu schools. So obviously, we come from a culture of learning and higher learning, and that's what we're going to learn about today. The first institute of higher learning, first university, was in Africa. So it is very befitting that we continue the conversation, and especially with this iconic and great elder we have. We don't usually have a lot of celebration around our Black girls, but it's always such a privilege to host the ones who are academic, the ones who are standing strong. I don't want to use the word feminism, we'll get into trouble, but we've got Prof. Elelwani Ramugondo today. She is one of the leaders of academia, and she is based out in Cape Town. And I think you do work with UCT, ne, Prof? Am I correct?
Yes, correct. It's the University of Cape Town.
Yes, thank you so much. As I was saying, it's such a privilege to have brilliant Black girls on the platform, and we are really looking forward to your engagement today as you teach us about universities and societies. And I'm going to just hand over to you to take it away.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Nziki. I'm so grateful to your ancestors and your parents. I keep finding out about the three sisters, the amazing three sisters, one of whom we crossed paths when she was a student at UCT, NOMSA. She might not remember me, but I was her warden. And yeah, I just remember her being agentic and a firebrand. And I'm not surprised when I read up on your parents. I just know. And you are gifts, the three of you, and being creatives in many different ways. I mean, even just one of you encompasses so much about what it means to be a creative. And there is so much about that we've lost as universities. And I thought it was also important that we were quite intentional in using plurals for university and for society, because the danger often is that if I'm speaking and coming from the University of Cape Town, it could be that your audience think that I am talking about the University of Cape Town, my employer. So it's good that we have broadened the conversation to be about universities in general and societies in general, because they come in different forms. But universities are very interesting. Um, uh, they have they became part of society thanks to Africa, as you've already mentioned. In indicating very clearly that the very first university was established on this continent, and so in the present day, universities have become institutions that must be taken seriously, for better or for worse. If these institutions are not interrogated, a lot can go wrong. They are endowed with a lot of authority, a lot of power. Sometimes they use that power well, and at other times they don't. They're complicit sometimes in many of the ills that we find in society. I mean, in South Africa, for instance, inequality continues to rise. And if we do not ask ourselves as universities the extent to which we perpetuate that inequality, then we are really not fit to be regarded with any semblance of respect. So the public does need to scrutinize and look very closely at the role that we're playing in society. And what I find really fascinating is that it was not until Rose Must Fall in 2015 that we interrogated our role and purpose in society. I mean, isn't that telling? Isn't that like it's an indictment, really? Because it isn't like there were no scholars who would regard themselves transformative, right? People in the Council for Higher Education, academics, professors who should have read the science and came to the conclusion that we were basically forced into by Rose Must Fall to say exactly when is it that we're going to say that we have decolonized,
Mm.
right? So basically, they reminded us that the work of decolonization was yet to be accomplished. Um, and you can't talk about decolonizing universities without looking at exactly what is it that we are offering society, and to what extent have we pushed back against coloniality, because a lot happened after universities as an institution became prominent in the global north, or the minority world, a better way to name those parts of the world, because we're the majority world, they're the minority world. But so they adopted this idea of a university and pretty much corrupted it. Yeah. And it was thanks to Rose Must Fall that we began to put together a proper decolonial critique of the academy. And I think it's important to name a few of those elements, because I think they become useful, right? So, I mean, the first one being the fragmentation of the knowledge project. Yeah, that the university as we know it in modern times is about disciplines. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't pay attention to what it means when the academy and the knowledge project is fragmented. So basically, we're talking here about the scattering of information, of expertise, and insights into disconnected academic fields. That's what the fragmentation is about. And when you have that, then it means that you will struggle to understand complex issues in society.
Mm.
You really are going to struggle. And it isn't surprising that the knowledge project became one that is fragmented in the minority world, because you had on the main universities being established to serve the state, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it means that when disciplines then go elsewhere, um, it should be that state where they land up that they serve. You had the university, for instance, in Germany, at the time that it was called Prussia, the Humboldt University, where the university there was geared towards producing civic servants, right, to serve the state. And if you look at the American system, you had the land grant system where universities were established to meet industrial and agricultural goals, right? And beyond that, you had monasteries establishing universities, the medieval guilds, those elites of the time, um, pretty much establishing universities that enjoyed some form of autonomy. But the problem is that when those disciplines then begin to go to the colonized world, it's those states that continue to be served, right? Um, and then you have the phenomenon which Lewis Gordon calls the disciplinary decadence, right? Where it's really about disciplines looking after themselves, right? Being very precious about their methods, about their rules, detached from reality. Um, yes, we inherited a lot of that in the disciplines that we have in the modern university. And then you also have Cartesian dualism, where the body and the mind must be seen as separate and independent from each other. I mean, this is
Yeah.
what we inherited from Rene Descartes, right? And the problem is with these traveling disciplines that then go everywhere is that they continue to carry this colonial narrative that knowledges only come from those minority worlds. And there's also a colonial authority where it's like these disciplines must only be conceptualized this way, and they can only be these custodians of these disciplines. That's the issue. And imagine we did not have the language to critique the academy until Rose Must Fall.
Shucks.
Yeah.
Can you believe that? And then what does that speak to? Obviously, because, oh, okay. I lost you there for a second. Okay.
Yes, we froze.
Okay. So now what I want to know is what is the purpose? What was the original purpose of universities, do you think? And then can we unpack how, if you're saying that Rhodes Must Fall is the one that catalyzed the decoloniality conversation, what does it mean about the academics before that and the spaces that they occupied? Does it mean then that Black academics were cowardly? Does it mean that people were just getting their bills paid? Because academia is quite a, like, it's an important space and we respect you guys. But if you actually don't have the power and you are in this field, then what must we think? Because I even saw there was a question about George Soros funding. Then does that mean then that the Black academics are not necessarily academics in the sense that you're supposed to be, where you're supposed to be a curious mind who unpacks things, but they actually get their orders from the funding? Or so can we unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So I think what is clear is that before 2015, what many of us had not acknowledged enough is that we were assimilated into a knowledge project that did not serve our contexts. So there was a lot of talk around transforming and transformation, but we were tinkering on the margins, on the edges. But that disconnect between curricular disciplines and context was not so sharp. There's a way in which coloniality hides behind prestige, right? Think, think about the Cecil John Rose statue and where it was prominently placed at the University of Cape Town. I mean, sitting with absolute grandeur, right? And when you actually read up about Cecil John Rose, the person, he looked nothing like how he was portrayed. With a physique that pretty much was decent. But in real terms, he wasn't a good looking human being. But also the way he was presented hid a whole lot of pillage, of murder, of theft, right? And many of us as students, but also as academics, who would walk past that statue, not realizing the history behind why this persona could be represented in this way on campus. Why? Because the history that was being taught did not have any of those details. So, we can't easily just blame the individuals because we are products of Bantu education, where the history of pillage was completely taken out. It takes one Kumani Matwele to bring reality into the picture. Just that act of throwing poo at the statue. It forced us to think about, where did he get the poo from? It was accessible, right? Accessible through indignities that a Black poor households and Black in generic terms in the Cape Flats and neighborhoods were subjected to, right? He gets the porta potty, he hires a taxi, and then he comes and he throws it. And you sort of like woken up from your stupor. And it's not that the conversation was not already happening. I mean, many of the Follis women, femme bodies, were making the point around how Black consciousness needs to be brought back into the conversation. Black radical feminism, and Pan-Africanism. Those conversations were there. But to concretize it, Kumani did what he did. That reality can be kept so far away from the academic project if we are assimilated into what disciplines do. They often just think about exactly what I mentioned earlier, their methods and their rules, right? And in the words of Lewis Gordon, recoiling from reality. And I mean, it becomes so important then to think about how universities in Timbuktu were all about, right? So in this corruption that happened when universities as institutions were established in the minority world, a lot was lost. And I think it is very important that we begin to remind ourselves about the historical facts involving Timbuktu. And I think it was very important that you started us off there. in that, yes, Timbuktu was established as a trading point between West Africa and the rest of the world through North African merchants who were mostly the Tuareg, people who are able to navigate a very treacherous terrain, the desert, right? I mean, obviously, that's knowledge, right? They knew how to navigate that space so much that they established these trading routes. And Timbuktu then gets established. But then you have Africans uh, leading in knowledge and science. And we're talking about the 13th century, right? And by the 15th century, you have um, uh, mathematicians and astronomers in Timbuktu um, being custodians of knowledge around the rotation of planets and phenomena such as the eclipse, the lunar and solar eclipse. And you have Europe catching up with that knowledge only about 150 or 200 years later, depending on which part of Europe you're talking about. Yeah. And then coming back to what you mentioned, the establishment of the first university, the Sankore University. Yeah. And, some people may not know this, but this was a mosque which was established in 989 AD. So this is in the 10th century by a woman. The
Yes.
mosque was established by a woman, and incredibly, but also again, we understand how invisibility works, right? The name of that woman is not known, right? What is known is that she was wealthy and that she came from a group of Ghanaian people, and imagine that a woman gets to establish a mosque, which later becomes Sankore University, which can accommodate 25,000 plus students. Yes, and um, when you read on this history, you learn that at the time in the 14th century that Sankore is established, there were other universities, 11 or more in Timbuktu, and universities not in the current understanding of universities, in that they were not institutionalized entities for knowledge. They were rather gatherings of scholars who were brought together by common interests. Um,
Jesus.
and it's so important to be able to distinguish between a university as an institution and universities such as these that are brought about through common interest. And what also becomes very important is that there's evidence about what we're talking about. We're not making this up. The evidence can be found in manuscripts, um, manuscripts written mostly in old Arabic text, but also some that are in other languages that were found in Timbuktu at the time, collectively called the Jami texts, with languages such as Bambara, Hausa, Peu, and Fulani. So these are languages that found themselves in these texts, and I believe there are about 700,000 manuscripts that are currently being restored. Um, Yes, and with South Africa playing a
Sure.
role it's not insignificant that we playing some role, and this is thanks to the former President Thabo Mbeki, who committed about 7.5 million to the restoration of some of the manuscripts, focusing on astronomy. Um, so it's really important. But I think what is important is to take away lessons from these universities. Like what about them? What was so different about them? And if I could pick up about 6 lessons that we can pick up from the Timbuktu history, one is the democratization of knowledge. So knowledge, not the reserve of the powerful and the elites. And we're talking about um, physics. We're talking about chemistry. We're talking about medicine. The ability to prescribe medicine from plants. We're talking about theology, astronomy, and where you don't have an institution or institutions being the ones that are the custodians of these knowledges, but you have families that take interest in knowledges and encouraging scholarship, such that they had family libraries. And there are manuscripts today that some families in Mali refuse to give up because they don't trust how that knowledge is going to be handled.
Mm.
I mean, that this should not surprise us, right? We have, even in South Africa, families that generation after generation have these custodians of
Ye-
healing traditions.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and yeah, so the democratization of knowledge is very, very important. And then secondly, the fact that knowledge was integrated. So again, mathematics, physics, chemistry, physics, metaphysics, all of that, uh, you know, treated together. No one knowledge seen as more superior than the other. And there is a Sudanese saying, which really, when I read about it, made me laugh, which is salt is from the south, gold is from the south, from the north. Sorry, salt is from the north, gold is from the south, money is from the land of the whites, uh, but God's words, knowledges, and lovely stories only come from Timbuktu. So
Yes.
think of that, right? God's words and knowledges of all types and lovely stories. I mean, that tells you about how the humanities were held in high regard. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a very important lesson. And I think the other is that we can now debunk the myth that Africa had no written history. Uh, these manuscripts tell us that's a lie. It's a blue lie. And then the fourth lesson that I mean, I found it so fascinating was that scholars of those times were peacemakers. They were called upon whenever there was conflict in any part of West Africa. Imagine that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
beautiful, absolutely
Yes.
beautiful.
You
Um,
know, okay.
yeah, and then the fifth lesson is that Timbuktu was multicultural. So it attracted scholars from all over West Africa and beyond, including Al-Andalus, which is ancient Spain. So people who came, and who knows, maybe it is how, the minority world got to know about the richness and the innovation, the high level of scholarship, that some things got stolen in that way. And then lastly, multilingualism. you know, yes, Arabic was a lingua franca, but there were these other languages that were also given space. Yeah. So I think there is so much. And I mean, if I were to wave a magic wand, what I would like to see of universities even today is that they are helping us to self understand as a people, such that we create and bring about life sustaining goods and ideas, and that the spirit is allowed to infuse those ideas and those life sustaining goods. I really think that's what the universities should be doing.
You said something so interesting. You spoke about some families having callings, so a family will, this is they're the custodian of culture for this specific thing, right? But what's happening now is that we are fixated on money and materialism, and people are not following their callings. And you can even see, like, when you look at the police system, or you look at, it's the wrong people there. Even in our creative sector, it's not artists, it's actually performers who are putting on makeup and have got white capital PR, but they don't even have one bone of creativity inside of them. So then, how do we maneuver this space that we're in now, where you might be called to be a truth teller, but in your space, the white people have already created something that resembles you, but is going to push their agenda and propaganda.
Mm. Whew. And this is why I'm saying, the spirit must infuse, um, must be allowed to infuse what it is that we create, right? Because without that spiritual grounding, we are going to be mesmerized by what the minority world has introduced in our world. And that's why that Sudanese proverb is so interesting, is so important. Because money, yes, comes from that minority world. Yeah. But he says in Timbuktu, you have God's words, knowledges, and lovely stories. I mean, lovely stories are linked with livelihoods
Yeah.
where there's flourishing, and people can tell stories that bring about more life, rather than death, right? And here's the thing: I find that we don't allow ourselves to marinate in our own stuff enough. To marinate, when you read about Timbuktu, there's no stopping you. I mean, you just find, and you read, and it's so, it's engrossing. But that's just one example. When I was flying from Washington D.C. to Nairobi, I happened to watch a documentary. I mean, I love documentaries. I struggle with entertainment, because, as you say, right, people who look like you and I
Yes.
can get paid top dollar, right?
They're proposing to be
Yeah,
us.
to keep
Yes.
us entertained, to keep us entertained. To mesmerize us with stuff that looks glittery and all of that. But this particular documentary was about someone called Belial, a creative. He makes music, right?
Yeah.
And it's jazz, but a
Yes.
different kind of
Spiritual.
jazz.
Yes.
Exactly. And
Yes.
and as he was being described and spoken about, this the person, the narrator was saying, he's a bit of an enigma because he writes about emotion. He writes about life. That's not what you expect from a black an African American male, because that's not what sells, right? It doesn't sell. And this kind of work that you're doing. And of course, many of us know Tandiswa King Ta's work, right? And it's that kind of music that it's not about selling, it's not about entertainment. There's communication to spirit through the work. Um, so it's not like we can't do this. It's not like we can't do this. We're just not spending enough time marinating in our own stuff.
Yeah.
We're not marinating enough in our own stuff. If we did that, we would be okay. And I think that's just one part of it. The other, I think, is around internalized oppression. Such that we struggle when anyone who looks like us is doing fine, is doing okay, or is doing something that is different. Why is it that I would want Nziki to fail in what she's doing? Why is that? Except if it's internalized oppression. But I also think that underlying all of that is fear. I think there's a lot of fear around accepting that we are not inferior. Because, I mean, there are consequences to recognizing that we are not inferior. I mean, the one consequence is that you no longer can wait for a savior. It can be scary. If you've always thought you're so inferior as a black person that a savior must come from the minority world and save you. I mean, just think about it. If we didn't have to wait for the minority world people to come and save us from COVID, imagine. Imagine. But it is much
We
easier.
didn't need to be picked because we're a bunch
Yes,
of pick me's.
pick me, pick me, because it's so fearful for some to say, no, no one's coming to save you. You're gonna do this yourself. So there's that fear, but I think there's also this fear around what does it mean? The past. What does it mean? Regret about missed opportunities, right? If I've always been sufficient and enough, what does it say about my past, my family's past, my parents' past, my ancestors' past? Their failures become intolerable. My own failures become intolerable. So I'd rather I chill.
So it's an excuse.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's go to the comment section because there's a lot of people who have got things to say. If universities and by extension the professionals they produce are to be occupied towards the end of serving society, how then is society to be understood?
I think this is again the work that universities could assist with unpacking. Um, and I mean, and society is an English term, right? We've always understood on this continent that there were no borders, right? I'm in Nairobi, as I said, currently, and yesterday we had the benefit of visiting the National Museum of Kenya, and just the history of movement of a people who were diverse, who were in these parts of the world. I mean, there's reference to Bantu who came and went. And the question is, are these groupings societies, or are they not? Are they something else? Um, so societies as a term that we have inherited from the North needs to be unpacked. And again, universities could play a role, given that English has become so dominant, and we think of the world in English terms. Um, Otherwise, it would be Bantu, meaning humanity. Um, that's what we would understand from an African cosmology. Um, and when you think of humanity in those terms, in the Ubuntu terms, then human beings coexist, groupings coexist. And when I spoke about how there was a role for scholars in Timbuktu as peacemakers, that should really wake us up. If looking at what we are faced with globally currently, um, genocide, denied, even as it's happening, um, the role of universities in that story. Um, there's a lot we can say there. Genocides that are ignored, Sudan, and what's happening there. Um, because again, it's this inability to recognize the humanity of certain parts of the world, of people from certain parts of the world. And professions, I'm afraid, as conceptualized from the minority world, have not done the work of helping us coexist as humanity, as people coming from different parts of the world. So there's a lot in that question. The answer is there's a lot of reckoning by professions on the work that they have not even begun to do.
Oh, okay, let me go to the next one. Uti, I see education we get as a framework where we are taught to think in European terms and memorizing and upholding what we've been taught, and really how to think outside the box and reinventing the box. So we are taught to work for. Mm.
Mm. Oh yeah, that brings me back to my own scholarship. So I was lucky. I must say I was very, very lucky. Um, at the time that HIV/AIDS was beginning to be a real issue, I mean, one can go into the story of how HIV/AIDS become an issue for Africa, right? And the face of HIV and AIDS is African all of a sudden as we enter democratic South Africa. But I don't want to go there. I don't understand enough, right? But I get thrown into some work involving mothers and children with HIV. And at the time, there was a lot of focus on the adult with HIV. Um, but there were babies who often were the first instance in which a mother would know that she's HIV positive, right? And what I encountered in the clinic where I did some voluntary work, because I was already an academic at the time, but I felt I needed to, yeah, get involved in treatment interventions that could be appropriate. And what I saw was this mother and her child with nothing happening between them. So the mother would have been told, your child is HIV positive, you're HIV positive, your child has 3 or 4 years to live. What must the mother do? Right? So they later told me, after we had started working, that they waited for death to come find them. Yeah. So I brought in the tools of the trade. I mean, so yes, disciplines coming from the North come with a lot of baggage, but there are also aspects to these disciplines that are useful, right? So occupational therapy, especially for a pediatric occupational therapist, play is critical, right? It's a language between a parent and their child. It's their first social
Mm.
engagement. So that was not happening. So I found ways to bring that back into the picture until one mother said to me, "Oh, I see it, I get it, Elelwani." And I'm like, what do you get? Says she, when my child is playing, he looks happy. And when he's happy, I'm happy. Right? So the mothers told me about how they revived their
Mm.
mother, that relationship. But what the profession had taught me, occupational therapy, was that play is for children. Like really, over and over and over again. And this is not just occupational therapy, but also psychology, right? Play is for children. Except that's not how I understood my childhood. Yeah. I grew up at a time, especially when we moved from Mamilodi to Venda, where whole communities will be involved in
Mm.
what is Mahundwane. Trying to think of another South African indigenous language for Mahundwane. But it's where, after harvest, you would have certain parts of the harvest left intentionally in the field so that there are many there are structures that emulate the home that children would build, and they would have adults visit them and eat meals, right, that are cooked in these
Yes,
places called
yes,
mahundwane. Yeah.
yes.
So, but that all died. At a certain point, this thing disappeared, right? One generation later. So that's when I got this crisis for me, saying, what's happening in our societies as Black people, such that one generation later, we no longer recognize play that is shared across generations. Yeah. So that's what took me into work that later got me to stumble upon the concept occupational consciousness,
Mm.
which is an ongoing awareness of hegemony, and that it is through what we do every day through which we either perpetuate or disrupt oppressive systems, and that there are consequences for health, both at an individual and collective level. I mean, yesterday, we were also at this museum, uh, treated to a group that were dancing, traditional dance. And I was the only delegate of the conference that I'm attending that, on invitation, joined the dance group. Everyone was like, right?
Mm.
And then I said afterwards,
Sophisticated.
yeah, after I went, people were like, oh, wow, yo, yeah, yeah, wow, like, and thank you for saving us. You took one for the team, right? But I'm like, the thing is, if adults allowed themselves that way of engaging in the world, we would have less mental health issues. We would have less mental health issues. So we are regurgitating a lot of what professions, disciplines tell us. Like I was saying, I was taught play is for children, but it's not true. It's not true. It's a form. of existing in the world. There's a lot around what we do as adults that is play, but not in the performative sense. Um, there's one of my doctoral students. Well, he's no longer a student because he's graduated. He's now Dr. Nkosinati Kuela. And he looked at Isini Nesandi, so vibration and sound, as accessible and existing tools for therapy. Ooh. Ooh. And his work and the thesis was basically installations where he shared traditions around sound and vibration that he curated, drawing from custodians all over the continent. And guess who was someone who and I don't even know whether it's you can use the word encourage, because he had a dream that he had to go visit Usanusi Credo Mutua before he passed on. And during that visit, he realized that he has to do this work, right? Because previously he had done instrumentation, so making instruments using organic material, picking up that there's a difference between the sound that comes from organic material and the other stuff. And but for his doctoral work, it was sound and vibration generally, and as a resource for healing. Oh my. The one installation that he showcased was based on a tradition from his own family. Um, I can't recall the exact term, but his work is now available, so you can Google it and it's available. It's online, it's curated as an open access resource. So, and this installation involving his own family members involved sitting around with traditional beer in the middle and sharing stories and at times getting up and dancing together. I've never seen bodies move so beautifully. And the spiritual depth that is there, but also a lightness at the same time. I mean, and he describes how those spaces were about the family self-understanding in new contexts. How is that not a university? How is that not a university?
And you made such an important point earlier on about depression, and how this wasn't mental illness and depression really wasn't our thing. And that's because we used art as healing. Even as you say, the sound therapy, using rocks for sounds. These are all ancient ways that Africans used to deal with healing. And perhaps because we were so sophisticated, we flew over the minds of the minority, it seems like, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because there are certain things that you cannot explain, right? And it's okay. A human being with humility knows that not everything ought to be understood. Yeah. It just needs to be experienced and enjoyed. Yeah. Uh, but the minority world introduced this need to unpack and know everything. Yeah. So that you can actually take over the role of the creator.
Our Lord and Saviors.
And unfortunately, you have us on the other side waiting for the Lord and Savior. So we've played into this, and it has not done well for the minority world either, because it's not like you don't have people who are from the minority world who understand what we're talking about, but they've been stifled. And I mean, in years gone by, we understand that there are women who were burnt, right, who were set on fire because they were understood to be witches. White women in Europe, right?
Yes.
I mean, we have a common friend who reminds me in that I can see it. I can see. I mean, I can see Gillian. Hello. There's certain capabilities that I can't explain. What she does with text, how she writes. It can't all just be this. This is about gifts,
Mm.
spiritual gifts that,
Mm.
as I say, must infuse
Mm.
the life-sustaining goods and ideas that
And it almost
university. Mm.
it feels as if that's the part that we've left out, right? Our spiritual gifts.
Mm.
Like in Africa, we didn't have like body mental illness, body bipolar, but we understood good to know abantu abadala bahlezi phezu komuntu, or we
Mm.
had things, we had room for all of
Mm.
these intricacies and different types of humans, and
Mm.
it's spiritually based.
Mm.
So it's really fascinating how we've been removed. And then lastly, I don't know if you've noticed how, like, for example, Mary DeHaas, um, her thesis was on black marriages or something like that. But what is it about the minorities where they feel as if they can take AMA observation and make us science projects? When do we get to do the same with them? Because they've got some deep pathologies that we need to unpack. So, but when we want to do these theses in these universities that are controlled by them, then I can't get there and be like, okay, guys, I'm coming to Rhodes. I want to do my PhD in white privilege.
I have one project that I wish I had time. I want to visit homes in Constantia and see how Mandela is portrayed. I want to see
Yes.
Mandela and how he's curated on their walls and what that says about who Mandela is
All
for the
right.
minority world.
Yeah, it's time for us to study the minority world, guys, because
It's tough. It's tough.
sure. And I can't
It's tough.
imagine how tricky it is in especially the space that you are in without getting you fired. I'm sure you have to
Yeah, it's
there's a lot of
navigating a very tight rope, a
yes.
very, very tight rope. And I have a lot of sympathy for many like me. And sometimes, we are harsh um, on ourselves, on each other, because we don't fully appreciate how tight it is. Because, I mean, it could be easier to just pack and leave and go elsewhere. But the university is a public university. It's a
I
public
wonder
university.
I wonder what needs to change though, because we don't want to keep seeing Bo Professor Mamoketi being replaced and putting in a new Mamoketi until she misbehaves, then you remove her, then you put in
Mm.
another Mamoketi. And the problem is that also the Mamochetis get there with a big ego and they're like, yeah, I'm the special one, until the blackness comes to the fore now, where the white people have to deal with your blackness. And then suddenly these elite academics remember their blackness. That's also a problem that we deal with, because you academics love to be elitist and special feeling, and but then you
Where are
also
you,
go.
man? Where are you, man, Nsiki? Can we not be expected to be perfect? So I mean, Mamreti tried to be herself in, a
Yeah,
way that she understands. Why must she be punished? You
yeah,
know, and I think that's the thing. We need to have room for imperfections. And it's
yeah.
not like Mamkheti, Prof. Pakeng doesn't know. She has great insight and she has
Mm.
learned as well. And what I love about her story is that she's still around. She's still,
Yes, yes,
using the lessons that she has learned. And
yes,
she also has a very big heart in terms of
yes,
others that she sees. And she also has a big room to allow, you know, people to be who
yes.
they need to be.
No,
Hmm.
I'm not saying specifically her. I was saying a Mamoketi, where you get
I
in
know.
there and you're like, then we also have to navigate this thing
Mm, mm,
between the blacks who feel special,
mm,
and
mm.
then whiteness reminds them that actually you're
Hey,
replacing them.
hey, hey. Yeah, it's a lesson for all of us.
For all of us. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your important time, all the
Thank
way
you.
from Nairobi.
Thank you,
And,
my fellow
and
queen.
and we wish you the best. I don't know if there's any programs that you're working on that you'd like people to know about.
We have the Decolonial Summer School, which we host every year. So it's a place where we experiment with a different kind of university, and it's in January.
It's in January. I hope that Moya Podcast will be accommodated in the plans there and be invited to come and live stream that panel.
That would be great. That would
We
be
will be.
fantastic. We'll be in
Thank you
contact.
so much.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Prof. And I love how you protected another queen. Definitely Mambo Kheti, we are sitting behind her. But we needed a bit of spice.
Fully understand. Fully understand.
Thank you. I'm signing off
Sure.
from the audience. About 250 people tuned in to listen to you this afternoon. So
Wow.
thank you to everybody. Guys, Moya Light, upright, please can you subscribe?